So if you can introduce yourself.
My name is Evelyne. What else do you want me to say?
Thank you. If you're comfortable with sharing, when did you begin telling your story, and why did you decide to share your story?
Well, before I told my story, there was a first conference at the Marriott Hotel in Times Square, and that's where it started, the Hidden Child Foundation. And they had a 3-day lecture with all the survivors coming in and people speaking to us and all that. But I remember going there, feeling the fear again. It was, that's when I started really. But once I was there, I met 2 friends of mine who also survived, so I felt better. But that was the first experience. Then, of course, sharing my story was with the Steven Spielberg interviews, and that was difficult. But it had to be done. I mean, we want to pass on the stories. They should be known. Young people should know what happened.
Oh.
And we don't want it to happen again, fortunately. It happens, but we have to let this know. We have to.
Why are you deciding to tell your story now and today?
Anytime I'm asked, I want to tell my story. If you're going to pass it on to young people, what could be better? I am so happy and proud of my grandson who joined the 3rd generation Holocaust survivors. And he's now going to a conference which is now in Paris this coming weekend. And he'll represent the 3rd generation of Holocaust survivors from New York.
Wow.
So it's, yes, definitely, anytime we should tell our story when we have a chance.
And were you always open with sharing your story to your family and to your children and your grandchildren?
Yes, to my children, of course. First, they start to ask me questions. Well, did you have a nice childhood? And I said, no. Why?
Right.
So little by little, I would tell them a little bit here, a little bit. But it was difficult, I realized much later on that it was very difficult for them too, to know that I was their age when I told them my 9/11, let's say. I was their age during the war, and so it was hard for them too to realize that I went through this.
And was your husband and your companion, were they open with what happened with them as well?
Well, my husband just told me the story once, and that's it. I never spoke about it after that. All his friends never knew.
Wow.
No, I never said a word. No, I never spoke about it.
Yeah.
We don't. The only person I would speak about it was my sister.
Yeah.
Even with my parents, I didn't speak about it. Though they would meet their friends, they would always speak about the war, and I didn't want to listen.
Yeah.
You know, I just, yeah. But now, of course, it's important. Very important.
What does Holocaust education mean to you?
Well, it's, as I say, it's good that that is being done. I know there's only 2 states in the United States that have mandatory education, New Jersey and Illinois. But after we did Witness Theater, Selfhelp took us to the high school of the Bronx Science High School, and they have a little museum. And I was glad that the students had Holocaust classes.
Yeah.
So I was very pleased with that. I mean, we have a very tragic heritage, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It has to be passed on. People have to know. As I said, my father, in Poland, my parents were both born in Poland, but they met in Belgium. But my father joined the Jewish Socialist Party. And he was always fighting for the rights of workers. He was always involved with that. And when they met in Belgium, and my sister was born in Brussels, and in 1926 they came to Paris, and they joined the Jewish Socialist Party. Then he joined also the French Socialist Party. In 1936, France was governed by the Socialist Party. And the good result out of this, that he got connection, and they became French citizens, my parents, and Rochelle. When I was born, I had to be naturalized because my parents were foreign. That was the law that then changed. So I became a French citizen at the end of 1 year old. My parents became citizens, and my sister in 1938, before the war. And otherwise, life was normal. I went to kindergarten, that I remember. They used to show us films of Charlie Chaplin. We called him Charlot, and he was funny, and of course he was a mime, so he was popular with children all over the world, and certainly in Paris with us. So it was, my father was he made ladies' handbags. He was a craftsman. He used to design them and make them, and that was before the war. He worked for somebody, and later on he worked for himself. But otherwise, life was normal. We didn't have, in our neighborhood, there were very few Jewish families. We lived in the north of Paris. We didn't live in a Jewish neighborhood. And, but otherwise, life was normal. Until it was not.
Was it just your family living in Paris, or did your father's siblings move to Paris as well, or your mother's siblings? Or was it just you, your sister, and your parents living in Paris?
My father's sister and brother came to the United States even before or after World War I. But my mother, 2 sisters, there were 9 siblings.
Wow.
2 sisters stayed in Warsaw. They all vanished with their families, except 1 cousin survived anyway. And then one uncle stayed. I had 1 uncle in Belgium. In Paris, my mother had a brother and his wife. And we used to see them before the war, sure. And they were deported. And then she had a sister that she was close to with her husband, and my cousin Jeanette, who was 20. They also died in Auschwitz. Then I had an aunt and an uncle that survived in Paris. So they were, as I said, they were 4 to survive out of 9. She was very badly affected. And I became aware of the war. We went to seashore in the north of France in August 1939. And we went, as a matter of fact, with my uncle, my aunt, and my cousin Jeanette. And September 1, 1939, the Germans invaded Poland, and France and England declared war against Germany. And I heard my parents and my whole family, they said, the war, la guerre, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I could see their faces. Scared, sad, something terrible had happened. And my father, who was a French citizen, had to leave us and go to Paris for mobilization. But the thing is, he was already 48 years old. So they told him, no, we're not going to take you, but please take this mask. They had this rubber mask with a long trunk, like an elephant trunk, heavy rubber. So he took it home and he decided, I may as well try it on. So he tries it on. Except he can't take it back. He can't take it off. And he panics and he runs to a neighbor, rings her bell. She opens the door and starts to scream to see this horrible mask. That was the beginning of the war. And then we came back in Paris. And for a while, nothing was really happening. But then in May 1940, the Germans invaded Holland. And then May 10, Belgium fell. And then they started to march for France. We panicked. Everybody panicked. And my father said, where the Germans are, I don't want to be. I know them. And we took 2 little suitcases on June 11, and we went to the station where we met 3,000 people. Everybody wanted to get out of Paris. The Air Force, the French Air Force, had darkened the sky so that they shouldn't see, the German, in case they come with airplanes, they shouldn't see 3,000 people. And it was like black soot that was falling on our faces. We were very, very lucky all throughout the war, because we were very lucky we survived the war. But on that day, we were also very lucky we got a train. It was a Red Cross train for children. So I was a little girl, my mother pushed me in the train, they pushed themselves, we got a train, we went south. We went to the center of France, which are mountains called Massif Central, in a little village. And in that village, they rented a little room. And a week later, there was a town crier. People had no radio. It was a little village, no newspapers. So there was big news. There was a town crier with his drum. He asked everybody to go to the center of the village, where the mayor was crying, and he told us we lost the war. France had lost the war, but they had signed an armistice with Germany. And Germany did not want to occupy all France. They needed soldiers because they wanted to invade England. It was 1940. So they only occupied half of France. And we were very lucky. We were what is called a free zone. They made a pact with a collaborating government, which was called the Vichy government. And we were in a free zone. My father had to work, so we went to Lyon, which was a big city where he could work. And they rented an apartment. My sister went to work for a big French company. And my father managed to work in the apartment. He got some middlemen to give him everything he needed to make ladies' handbags, and they would sell it. Now, this was leather, that became black market. And anyway, that was the starting of the war. And I went to school. We were French citizens. The French collaborating government did not arrest French citizens. So we had some safety, a little safety. But what did they do? Other people from the Bund came to Lyon, and they started a resistance network. A young couple by the name of Cécile and Henri Steingart, they started this movement, this resistance network, and the goal was to find hiding places for Jews, because foreign Jews were being arrested even in the free zone. The French police would arrest them. So they would find hiding places for them. And they went to my parents and asked if they would allow my sister Rachel, who was 18 at the time, if she would be their courier. And they accepted. And my father made her a barker book with a false bottom, where she would put false papers in the bottom of the barker book, and she would travel by bus or train and go to wherever she was told these people were hiding. She told me some people did not even speak French, so she would speak Yiddish to them, and she would try to tell them what they had to learn with their new identity. And then she sometimes would escort them to the border of Spain or the Swiss border. Somebody else would smuggle them. She just would escort them. And she really, her function was really with the false papers, to bring false papers to people who need it, so they could live another day. And life was a little awkward, as I say. My father worked. My mother, at the beginning, was very hard to find food. We were hungry. In school, they would give us a vitamin that made our tongue purple, which we thought was funny. And they gave us a roll of bread, which was wonderful. But the germs had taken everything. There was no heat. We were cold. I was covered with blisters.
Did your sister volunteer to work for the resistance, or was she?
Oh, yeah, it was all volunteer, of course. As I said, my father was devoted to that party, and saving other Jews was very important to them. That was the goal. And that's what they did. But not only that, as I said, he belonged to the French Socialist Party. And a woman who was high up in that party came to Lyon. We were outside of Lyon, Villeurbanne, but anyway, she found him. And she went to my father, and her name was Suzanne Buisson. And she went to him and she said, "Will you help us?" And he said, "Yes." And she gave him pamphlets to distribute in Lyon, in the streets or whatever. It's a very dangerous thing to do. And he and his friend did it. She, later on, was arrested and deported. There is a street in Paris in her name.
Wow.
Because she was a resistant. So whatever they did, as I say, it's a miracle. Excuse me, it's a miracle that we survive all this. Because not only as Jews, but they were in a resistance, and that was so dangerous.
Yeah.
So that was our life in Lyon. And my father he would work. He would even hire a few people, always Jews, of course, that he knew. For a few months, Jews, a couple from Belgium, they were hiding in our apartment. We had an extra room, and my mother would find food for everyone, God knows how, and they never went out. It was really awkward. But we went out. I remember my parents taking me to the opera. I was a little girl. In Lyon, opera was probably cheap, so they bought tickets, and the four of us would go.
Wow.
And I took it to the movies. Wherever they went, but they never left me home, of course. Even if the movie was not for children.
Right.
I saw them.
Wow.
Yes, it was really... but then if we told all our friends, you have to ring twice the bell. And if we had a bell that only rang once, my mother was tense, I became tense, and we were scared. Always scared.
And what were your father's name, your mother's name, and your sister's name?
My father's name was Abraham, my mother Reisler, and my sister Rachel. During the war, it became Albert, Rosa and Raymond. Our last name sounded French. It was a Bialon. The B-I-A-L-O-N. The B-I is Polish, the Lon is French. So Bialon sounded very French. And with my name, Evelyne Bialon, I had no problem, never. It was not a Jewish name. So we were lucky with that too.
Yeah.
And so that's how we lived until November 1942. In November 1942, the Americans landed in North Africa, and the Germans came to Lyon. And we had to leave in a hurry. We were in trouble. And we took a train, we went to Grenoble. In Grenoble, the Italian army was occupying Grenoble and the rest of the south of France. And they did not bother Jews. So for a few months, we were okay. And then eventually the Germans were everywhere and were in big trouble. In Italy, they went against the Germans in the fall of 1943. And that's when the Germans decided to invade all France, and they wanted to send the Italian army to the Russian front. So they would desert. A lot of Italian soldiers tried to desert. And we lived in an Italian neighborhood. So the French police came in the middle of the night and rang every bell. And my father decided not to open the door. And they would ring and knock. They were ready to really force the door down. But neighbors, they said, there are those people there. They're never home. Why would they want to do that? So they didn't force the door.
Wow.
But meanwhile, it was the worst fear. And see my parents got so fearful. It was a horrible night. And my teeth were clattering. I was shaking all night. I couldn't stop clattering. So that's when they decided she can't stay with us. So they put me in a very, very nice boarding school in a little village in the Alps. And the food was good. We went skiing. It was amazing. It was a Catholic boarding school. And we said prayers every night. We went to Mass every Sunday. But it was really great. And I was there. It cost my parents a lot of money. And for 2 months. But then I had a little friend called also Evelyne. She was in a convent. And somehow the Germans got wind that there were Jewish children in that convent. They went to that convent. Luckily, my friend was spared. She was not on their list, but they did take a few Jewish children from that convent. So once there was panic among my parents and all the other parents. So they decided then maybe we should hire a smuggler, a passeur, a smuggler, so that I should go to Switzerland. Now this was March 1944. And a group of parents hired this smuggler, and we were 10 children, took the train from Grenoble to a little village called Almas, which is a border town. But the passeur, the smuggler, took on with him, besides the children, a couple, and the lady was very pregnant. And on the train, she got labor pain. So when we arrived to the village, to Almas, he said, you wait at the station, I'm going to take them to a hotel. And he took them, came back for us. I don't understand why he did cross us. He took us to a big field, lay down low behind bushes until I come for you. And it was getting very dark. There was a road, and all of a sudden we see trucks and tanks, German trucks, going probably south of France. And we're flat on the ground, cold. And the oldest one had a thermos, And I remember he crawled from child to child, giving us a sip of coffee. And I thought he was a wonderful person.
And at this point, you were by yourself, right?
The children, we were by ourselves. Then, meanwhile, the smuggler at the hotel, they all got arrested by the police, by the French police. And the smuggler told the police where we were, because the Germans were everywhere at that time. So the police came, they went by bicycle, they came and get off their bicycle and said, "Oh, come with us." Okay, so we followed them and we walked and walked until we got to the police station. And there was, they sat us on little chairs, and there was the poor lady. They gave her a blanket. She was, as I said, very heavy, and her hands were shaking. We stayed all night at the station. And one policeman said, "I don't know what to do with you." So the other policeman, when we ask the adjutant, the higher up, he calls him up and he gets an answer. He says, "I have 10 Jewish children, what should I do?" "I give you carte blanche. In other words, do what you want." And he was very happy. Of course, I didn't understand what carte blanche meant. But it meant that they didn't want to give us to the Germans. That's what it meant. And they were relieved that they didn't have to do this. And they took us in the morning, we walked forever, but they took us to a boarding school, which was on the border. And when we arrived there, the lady principal said, "I'm going to take you to the border." So after 2 days, they separated us in 2 groups, which shouldn't be too many, and we took different roads. And I was with a young man, 4 children and a young man, her assistant, and she was with 5 children on another road. And as we walk on this road, there were no traffic at all, there were no cars. But we see a German officer and a big dog coming our way, and of course my heart is pounding. And the young man whistles at the dog. So in France, you whistle at dogs, not at women. But he whistled at the dog. And he went his way, we went our way. Until the border. At the border, we met the other children and the lady principal. And the border was a barbed-wire fence. And they said, "Climb." So we climbed.
Wow.
Anything in my life. I mean, I was 11 years old. I was not a tomboy. And we climbed. And I got stuck on top. Anyway, there was a Swiss soldier who came and helped us to bring us down. And then we faced the lady and her assistant, their saviors. They were in France on the other side of the barbed wire fence, and we thanked them. And then I looked down as I tore my pants on the barbed wire fence. And she said to me, "Why are you worried about your pants? You're safe." And I became all red. I was so embarrassed. Anyway, we walked with the soldier on a big field, and he would turn around constantly. And somebody asked him, "Why are you turning around?" He said, "They're Germans patrol that come every half hour." We were lucky. Again. Then we were arrested by the Swiss authorities because we were illegal aliens. And we had to do a report. And then they took us to an internment camp near Geneva. And there I met my little friend Evelyne. She was there. We were so happy to be together. And in that camp, we slept on wooden floors with a little straw. They didn't give us enough food. They did not treat us well, but we were safe. And eventually, after 1 month, they put me in a foster home, and that did not work. They put me in another foster home. I had to stay. I was miserable. And I was there for a year. And luckily, my parents survived. And on my birthday, August 22, 1944, the Americans marched in Grenoble. My parents and my sister were liberated on my birthday.
Wow.
And on that day, my sister Michelle had a friend. As I said, everybody had to call her Raymond. But on that day, this friend came in front of the building where my parents lived. We were on the fourth floor, or second here, anyway, the window. And she screamed with all her strength, Rachel! They were free.
Wow.
And in March, I came back to Grenoble, and a month later, we went back to Paris. We had survived.
And at this time where you were on the border and by yourself, what was happening with your mother, your father, and your sister?
So my parents, at first in Grenoble, my sister eventually, she went to work in Grenoble soon enough, and when one colleague realized what was wrong, she said, if you want, my parents have a house, you can stay with them. So she stayed with them, but my parents stayed where they were. They were just lucky.
Just lucky.
Just lucky. And my mother, all that time, they were still, they did the resistant work, they went on. My mother would go to, outside of Grenoble, she would go to farms to get food, good food. And there were checkpoints, but she would go and come back with good food. So while I was still there, in Grenoble, we had good food, thanks to what she did.
Mm.
And they went on, she went on doing this, even after I left. My sister would have to go to meetings with the resistance. And one evening, she could not go because she had a cold, she was sick. My mother went in her place. She was very, very brave. On her tomb, I had written, Mother Courage. I mean, that's what she was. And, but as I say, we were so lucky that we survived being Jews, and for my parents and Michelle doing what they did because my father became the liaison between the Jewish resistance network and the French network.
Wow.
He was really involved in many things.
Your parents and your sister and you're all so selfless. It's incredible to hear that they were selfless and brave.
Yeah.
It's so incredible to hear that.
Yes. And all the young people, she would go out on dates. She would go. It was in Lyon, and people, they were all doing work that she did too. One would smuggle children to Switzerland. Another would. They all had their little jobs, and then they had a good time too. And the young men were trained with guns, and in Grenoble, they were involved in many dangerous things. Because I know my sister had a friend, his name was Oscar, and I had met him in the street. My parents would let me go, I would go on errands or whatever in Grenoble. I was 10, 11 years old. And I met him, he said, I'll take you home. And there was a big place, and in the middle was a man who was selling this taffy candy. And I said, oh, look, Oscar, he sells taffy candy. He said, we're going to do taffy candy out of him. He became very dark and so on. So what happened, he was a collaborator. He would invite young men, what do you do? And if they told him what they did in the resistance, he would denounce them, they would get shot.
Wow.
So one evening, we heard shots in our street. And I went down, looked the window, the man was dead. He apparently had come to our building. He had, with wine, he had a cellar, he was using the cellar, and they shot him. And my Russia's friend, the next day come and visit us, and we were excited, we tell him, and I heard 2 shots, he says, no, 3. So he was involved in that.
Wow.
And they were involved in all kinds of dangerous things, the young man.
Wow.
Yeah. It was, we're walking miracles. We really are.
Do you remember your parents ever telling you what was going on? Were you very aware of?
I was aware of everything.
Everything.
Yes, because they never had it. I mean, okay, let me go back to when there was the armistice sign in that we were in that little village. Right. And I said to my father, "What is armistice?" So he said, "It means the end of the war." So I said, "Why are you so sad?" He said, "Because there is a very bad man in Germany called Hitler, and he is very bad for us Jews." Mm. And by the way, when we came to this little village, the next morning, my father looks in the mirror, he became all gray overnight. Wow. It was a shock. Wow. Yeah. So my father explained to me always, and though I was a little girl, I was aware that my parents were involved in things. I knew that whenever, let's say I had a best friend in school, and she lived across the street, Lydia, and we would go to school together. But I knew never to tell her anything that goes on in my house. That I was Jewish, that what my parents were. My parents never had to tell me don't say anything. Wow. Because I just knew what was going on. Wow. Almost very scary thing that happened. When we went to Grenoble, we didn't go to Grenoble right away. We were outside of Grenoble in a little village, and we shared some kind of a house, like a stone house. They were like one after what you call here garden apartment. It was that kind of thing, but it was my stone with another Jewish family. And my parents in Lyon, wherever we were, we had a radio. We would listen to London every night. Mm. And that night, it was June 1943. We listened to London. And the correspondent announced that 2 men had escaped a concentration camp. And they were from Czechoslovakia, those 2 men, I think. They were the 2 only people that escaped Auschwitz. Mm. And they managed to get their way to Switzerland. And in Switzerland, they went to the BBC and started to tell them what they saw, what was happening. And the correspondent started to describe the gas chamber. And all of my sisters screamed, everybody, it was so horrifying. And I realized that I knew about my aunts and uncle that had been deported. So I realized on that evening what had happened to them, and we all realized that if we get arrested, that's it. Mm. Wow. It's very bad memories, to say the least. Yeah. But we're lucky. Just lucky.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me.
After we came back, first the food still wasn't good, and whatever, it was difficult. But my father went to work, Michelle went to work, I went to school, but it was difficult. Mm. It was difficult to adjust. And, but I remember, of course, May 8th was the end of the war in Germany, and everybody was in the street dancing. Mm-hmm. I remember that. We joined, of course, the Jewish Socialist Party again, called the Bund. I joined the children's part. My sister did youth, my parents the adults. What they did, of course, there were many orphans. So what they did, they wouldn't open orphanages. Two that I know of, that I knew of. One outside of Paris, one in Le Mans. But the one outside of Paris, I remember, I even went to visit. And what we did, we started giving shows. As well, Paris, we went to summer camp in England, and then we went to London to give a show. And a year later, we went to Holland, give a show in Amsterdam. So we would sing. There were shows in Yiddish. We would sing in Yiddish. I would sing a solo, a lullaby in Yiddish, and I would recite a poem. My father would coach me. It was a 5-minute poem about hands, what hands can do. And it was by a Yiddish poet, Einhorn. David Einhorn, his name was, anyway. And I would rehearse for many, many months because Yiddish was not my language, really. I understood, but I didn't speak it. Mm. And I performed in Paris and in England, in London, and where British Jews came to see us. They were so happy to see surviving children. Mm. And then in Holland, in Amsterdam, was another story. Most Jews we met had this number on their arms. They were survivors. But we gave shows, and the money would go to the orphanage. Also, I would say the Workmen's Circle in New York and the Jewish Labor Committee sent a lot of money to France, to Paris, for these orphanages and for the summer camp that I went to. The head of the Workmen's Circle came to Paris to help survivors. He came with money and so on. And he only spoke Yiddish and English, not French. So my sister was his secretary. She spoke the 3 languages. She spoke English fluently already.
Wow.
In Paris. And so she worked for him. And so they helped the survivors, especially from camps and so on. And in that meeting place, in that circle, there was also a soup kitchen. So any people in need, and there were many Jews in need, they could come in for a meal. Mm-hmm. So they helped each other. That's what I saw all through the war and after the war, Jews helping other Jews, always, and my parents in particular.
That's incredible to hear. Yeah. And it just shows that their altruism during the war too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we were saved also, these neighbors that didn't know us and said, they're old people, they're never home. Don't break down the door. They saved us.
Yeah.
We had a few instances like this that people helped us, sure. Well, it was not too good.
Oh, not too good. Okay.
The first experience. I came on my 70th birthday. I can't remember. Anyway, as I said, I was born in Paris. And my parents were born in Poland. So first, let me go back. My sister, in 1945, she married an American soldier, a Jewish American soldier. So she came here in 1946. She became a citizen after 2 years because she was a war bride. And as soon as she became a citizen, she could, because my parents were on a Polish quota. You had to wait 10 years to come here. Mm. And because we had priority, we came here in 1949. But the thing is, the consulate made a mistake. Because I was a minor, I should have been on my parents' quota. So my papers, they put me on a French quota, and my parents were on a Polish quota. When we got off the ship, so that's a mistake. They took us to Ellis Island. On a Friday night, they took us to Ellis Island. And because the weekend you can't do anything, so Monday, my brother-in-law got a lawyer and so on. But before that, there was a hearing. And I had an interpreter. I did not speak English. And the interpreter said, "How old are you?" And with a lot of anger, I said, "I'm 17 today." And they all laughed. Really didn't like them. Anyway, the next day, the lawyer got me out. And my poor sister had prepared a birthday party for me. And we were in this time. So she did it again. And she had a neighbor, and the neighbor said, "How do you like America?" "I don't like it." And my sister said, "You're just coming out of an asylum. What is there to like?"
Right.
So the first impression wasn't too good. And it took me a long time to visit the Statue of Liberty, because in an asylum, that's what you see, and you're behind barbed wire.
Right.
Also, I had a hard time assimilating. I met my friend Annelise, who was from Germany, and we would go and look for French. But she had learned, as I said, she spent the war years in Egypt, so she learned French. And she was very anxious to speak French, so we would speak French all the time. And we would look for people who spoke French, So I was not assimilating myself at all. It took me a year. Then I went to a summer camp, and I started to learn English because I had to.
Not because you wanted to, but because you had to.
I had to. And then I learned to. First I worked in factories because I didn't speak English, so I worked in factories. My parents needed, we didn't come with much money here, so everybody had to work. And I went to evening school, but it took me a while. But eventually, I went to work for the American Express. I worked to the office as a file clerk, and I really learned. Now, I knew how to type, but it's not the same board in France than here. So I had to relearn. So I relearned, and then a friend of my sister called me. She said, there is a job at the French broadcasting system. I went for the interview, got hired right away. So again, I was in a French atmosphere. Everybody spoke French. I was French even. And so I loved it.
And where was that job? Where was it located?
It's the French Embassy. It's called French Embassy. It's at the corner on 5th Avenue and 79th Street. And they have French cultural offices there, that also France Presse, the press that's controlled by the government. The French broadcasting system was controlled by the government. We were paid by the government, by the French government.
Wow.
And that's where it was. And the head of this office was the correspondent, and he used to broadcast every day from New York to Paris. And then any French celebrity would come to get interviewed by him. So I used to greet them. I just relished this job.
How long were you working there for?
6 years.
Wow.
Until my daughter was born.
Wow.
Yeah. But otherwise, I worked for a French bank. Also, as I say,
everything was France. Everything was French.
Always. So I worked for a French bank for 22 years until I retired. And I really enjoyed that too. So I never really assimilated completely,
Yeah.
But when you have an accent, you feel foreign anyway. It's difficult to, because the first thing people would ask me, well, where are you from? You have an accent.
Right.
I went to a store once, and this lady said, where were you? She didn't even ask me where I was from. Where were you during the war? I said, in trouble. This lady, it so happened, she had written a book about Jews in Italy, how they survived, and she found them here, and she did a whole program and wrote a book. I found in a clothing store by But anyway, yes, quite a mix. But that's what she.
Wow.
She didn't ask me where I come from. Where were you during the war?
Wow. Wow.
But so if you have an accent, I remember going to a meeting of the Hidden Child Foundation, and one woman said, "Well, I feel a little funny. I have an accent. Maybe people won't understand." And one woman got up and she said, "Look, when you have an accent, you speak 2 languages."
Right. Wow.
So let's not forget that. Well, my children, my grandchildren, of course. And I enjoyed photography and all the trips I made. So that's what I really enjoyed. After my retirement, I really had a good time.
And how did you meet your husband?
I was lucky. I don't know, I was 19, I was very young. I went to a resort. I had nobody to go with me. I needed a vacation. I was working. So I went to the resort and he said, "Je m'appelle Appel," and that's all I know in French. And so that's how I met him.
Wow. Oh, that's so special.
Yeah. And so, as I say, I'm very proud of my children, my grandchildren. They're all doing well. And, but mostly, before the pandemic, was a great time for me. For 20 years, I went everywhere, photographed everything.
It's amazing.
It was a wonderful experience.
That's amazing.
Yes. Right now it's difficult because our climate is in danger and young people are going to have a hard time with everything. And try to fight. That's what my parents and my sister did. Fight for the climate, for the health, for the democracy. But well, it's good to have a hobby that you love, and I would suggest to everyone to have a hobby. Mine is photography, and it's so rewarding. But not everybody can have a hobby as photography. Besides being expensive, you've got to have the the know-how, the talent, or whatever. But find a hobby, something that you enjoy besides the work that you do or you have to do. Find a hobby. Bird watching, collecting, whatever. Something that you enjoy, that you can enjoy for the rest of your life. People, after they retire, if they have no hobby, they're in trouble. What do I do? People who have hobbies, they're much happier in their retirement. Because they know what to do.
Yeah.
And so that would be my advice.